Welcome to Best Kept Secrets Travel Podcast, Episode 7. My name's Morgan.
And I'm Will, and on this episode we're going to talk to you why you should take a camera travelling, how to find inspiration for your photos, and how to think about the cameras that you might need to take along your trip to capture what you really want to on your journey.
Best friends, and that's for life. Who stay traveling? I'm talking worldwide, 65 countries between the two. Every moment is so unbelievable. Sharing the best kept secrets about the trips and mistakes they made that they can't forget. So tell me if you're ready for a time to remember as they gear up for the next adventure. Yeah. Woo! Best kept secrets travel.
The best way you can support us is by following us on socials. So that's Best Kept Secrets Travel on podcast, YouTube and TikTok, and The BKS Travel on Instagram.
Now let's get straight into it. The reason why you should be taking any sort of camera equipment, any photography equipment, videography equipment, whatever you want to call it, on your travels is because the main reason is that you're capturing memories. That should be the key reason why you take it.
And I mean, I genuinely take my camera everywhere when I travel, which I know sometimes gets on your nerves.
You're getting filmed by a GoPro no matter where Morgan is, no matter what time of day.
But for me, that it's just because I forget. I genuinely forget half the memories, like all the time, and I need to take photos. And I always try, and I don't say, right, stop here, we're gonna shoot here and do a photo shoot. I try and make it as natural as possible, which does mean sometimes I'm just shoving a camera in your face.
I'll be mid-conversation and this GoPro just appears out of nowhere. And overall, yes, there are certain times where it's a tiny bit annoying, but the main thing is, when we look back at it, it actually really does capture those really funny memories which otherwise you would forget about. It's those tiny little jokes, it's those tiny bit of moments when you're on a bus and you're half asleep and you're looking rough because you haven't showered in a matter of days. Those small things are what travelling is all about, and it's creating those future memories. One of the big things Morgan and I have also found is whenever we've come back home, family and friends really want to see what you've been up to, and there's no better way than sitting down, putting on a quick slideshow on the TV or on a laptop or whatever with just some clips, photos, or sending it to grandparents. I know my grandma and everyone.
Yeah, my nanny and granddad love to see it.
Either a tiny postcard with a few just snaps on it, because it does really mean a lot to people. It's also going to keep that memory a bit longer in your mind.
Oh, quick tip for that is a Moonpig card. Put all your photos on that, send it to your grandparents. They'll love it.
Or there are now loads of postcard apps which will deliver next day delivery. Seriously cheap. You can stick on 4 or 5 snaps on a postcard, little custom message. A lot of brownie points can be earned doing it this way. Next thing we're going to roll straight onto is how to find your inspiration for your photos. One of the main things that Morgan and I know we use a lot, we use Instagram. I've got a lot of photographers which I love following who also do editing videos and stuff like that. Personally, I love Jacob. You really like Drew Binsky.
Drew Binsky, Sam Calder, a lot. And so with lots of these things, nowadays it is so easy to find photographs and places that you can literally look up on the internet Instagrammable locations and then insert city name or country, and it is so easy now, so you've got no excuse not to get amazing photos.
And if you want a best kept secret, try not to actually use that. That is the foundation of trying to get you into photography. But the main thing Morgan and I are really passionate about is when you go on these holidays, try not to do the stereotype Instagram photo. Try and think of something creative. Try and think of something new. Maybe practice some of the techniques that you've learned from these different people if you're just starting out or you're really trying to improve your photography game or videography game. But really try and think outside of the box. What can I do differently? What can I shoot differently? Because that's what's really going to put you ahead and differentiating from people. Because if you are trying to make a bigger presence on any social media platform, you don't just want to be another person in front of Burj Khalifa standing in front of the same thing. You don't want to be
touching the Leaning Tower of Pisa.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone does Leaning Tower of Pisa. If you're going to do Leaning Tower of Pisa, think of a different pose that you could do. Yeah, think of something creative. You can be next to Leaning Tower of Pisa. Think of something completely different, completely new that you could do. Yeah. A lot of people do the Bolivian salt plains.
Yeah.
But the hilarious thing is actually the ideas that I'm still seeing, which which are new, which people come out with, and they're now pre-thinking before they even get that. And I think that's amazing because people are constantly thinking of the next funny thing that they can do with it.
But I think one of the other ways of not planning it is actually to do something like a free walking tour, because on a free walking tour, one, you're being shown around by a local who knows the local area and can show you all the prettiest places, and two, you're actually walking around these historical places, and you can get inspiration just by walking past these places. So I did a walking tour in Lima, and they had these beautiful, they did call them like social influencer areas because there were so many people taking photos there, but I would never found them otherwise. And there were social influencers actually taking pictures there, but there were actually no one that I followed. And so only by doing this free walking tour did I then find these places to then take photos.
Speaking of walking tours, we were also in La Paz, and then we came across that alleyway next to all the sort of witch doctor shops.
Oh yeah.
Bizarre hanging fetus llamas outside. Alpacas, we'll talk about that in a future episode, but we then came across that alleyway where it's this insane graffiti along, but it was a bit of a memorial, but unbelievably cool work and art style, and we got some photos outside of there. But by doing these different tours, especially with locals and not just the big tour groups, you will really get taken to places which you didn't expect that you'd be taken to, and it might encourage that creativity from you guys.
Yeah, so definitely get lost is essentially the point.
Yeah, basically try and get lost, try and be more creative, and just have a bit of fun with it, because that's how you're going to learn the most. One of the things that we really want to make sure when talking about inspiration for locations is there is a lot of Photoshop and editing done out there. If you see a certain skyline when you're at a place, don't be disappointed when you get to that place that it's not exactly as you pictured in that image. Because, I mean, talking from experience, I can edit an image and make it look like completely different time of day.
Yeah.
I could change the night sky to northern hemisphere instead of southern hemisphere. There are so many things you can do. So,
there's apps that show you how to do that, which is really easy now as well.
Yeah, and lots of creators are showing how they edit. I mean, Jacob's a great example. I absolutely love his style of photography, but one of the things you need to accept is his style of photography also includes serious editing just to emphasise just
the colours.
The colours, the night sky. That's something we just want to push out there, just so you think about it.
And I would say to actually go on your influencers that you follow and actually see if you can notice the same sky, because we've done that a few times where you actually see the same sky in different photos. But a very big one, and it's quite a famous one, that is Instagram v reality, is in Bali. There is this beautiful location that everyone goes, gets these stunning photos, but all it is a guy showing a reflection off a mirror, and you stand in a queue so you can get this exact photo, and they take it for you. And we'll put a photo up here of people doing this, and I think it's crazy because unless you know that, you would have no idea, and you think that people are just these amazing photographers getting these amazing images that they've thought of themselves, and it's not. They're getting this because they're paying a bloke to take a picture of a mirror.
Now the next step, whenever you're taking a photograph, whether it's landscape, portrait, wildlife, waterfalls, time lapses, whatever you want to do, one of the most important things isn't just location, it's also your timing, whether it be weather, tide, sunrise, sunset, whatever you're going for. That's one of the biggest impacts on anything. A lot of you guys, I'm assuming, who's listening or watching us on YouTube, you've probably heard of the golden hour. That's the hour straight after sunrise or the hour just before sunset. That stereotypically provides the best lighting for a lot of photographs, but for particular photographs that you're going for, that might not really be the time of day that you want to shoot. But you can look this up very easily by using Met websites, trying to look at the weather forecast. You can look at tidal websites if you're trying to shoot different rivers or oceans. If you're trying to do portraits, then sometimes you might actually use artificial lighting. But it really depends what you're going for. But remember, at the same time, technology is moving forward very quickly. You can either post-edit, or actually you can play around with the ISO and different settings on your camera, which really helps almost modify some of these experiences.
Yeah, and for me, the best time is to take photos is the golden hour at sunrise, because that is also when you have the least amount of people. So we've had some issues here so I went to the Taj Mahal and I queued up there before sunrise because I knew that they opened at sunrise, like there wasn't a time. Before sunrise, managed to get in. You can't ever guarantee good weather and good lighting.
Yeah.
So it wasn't actually that great from that perspective, but going in there we had maybe genuinely about 10-15 minutes of it being fairly empty and all to ourselves. 15 minutes later the Taj Mahal was packed. Regardless of the lighting, although the lighting was definitely better, the fact that we got there before the people were all there made all the photos so much better. And I've got one of my favourite photos that I took there as I call the Taj flip. But I got some great photos there, and as I was leaving, it was just so packed that you couldn't get any of those photos after that. And the opposite happened when we went to Christ the Redeemer.
Well, yeah, Christ the Redeemer, we turned up sort of midday. It was already pretty packed. The main thing is the weather.
So we'd actually planned to get there for just after sunrise, but what had happened was the night before, our first flight was delayed, which meant that our changeover was then we missed it.
We effectively had a day in Brazil, so we had to slot in Christ the Redeemer no matter what. We're going to call this best kept secret right now. One of my main points is if you turn up to a location and you're saddened by the fact that weather's not Instagram perfect, it's not your Gapyar experience that you really wanted, it's not how you really pictured it to be, still take that photo. I'm telling you right now, we've done Machu Picchu and it's not been the stereotypical weather and people were miserable and we're in hysterics. We've done Snowdon and we couldn't see further than a metre. I've been to so many locations. I've been in the Alps and it's been absolutely peeing it down with rain instead of
Christ the
snowing.
Redeemer, we turned up and by the time we left, we were standing like 10 metres away and we couldn't see it.
Exactly, but
just
by taking these photos, you're still capturing that memory. You can still have a good time. Just remember that a lot of your favourite moments, and you need to realise this, is actually the journey to the destination. It's not the destination itself. My favourite thing about Machu Picchu wasn't Machu Picchu itself. It was actually my journey there. It was the rainy days where we were all laughing whilst wearing ponchos. It's all those moments, and by capturing those moments, whether everyone looks like they're drenched, you're still going to see people happy and smiling, and they're the things that you should care about in life. It's not just always having it on a perfect sunny day.
Yeah, and these are really impressive sights, so really don't get put down by the weather.
No,
But
exactly.
I would always recommend trying to get there for sunrise if you can, because I personally just think that is the best time to see any of these sites that just get really busy. Because less people, good lighting, what more can you ask for?
Actually, that's another top tip. If it is raining, commit to going to that site, because if there's a chance there's a break in the rain, your highest probability of actually a low number of people still being out there. I remember being on the old town wall in Dubrovnik in Croatia. Absolutely storm, peeing down with rain. Decided I was going to commit to actually just walk through the rain.
Yeah.
Myself and ex-girlfriend were the only people on the whole wall in sight for at least a solid 20 minutes, and there was a massive break in the rain where it became sunny and people still didn't decide to go out on the wall in case it rained again. Absolutely perfect. Just commit to actually being spontaneous and having a bit of fun with it.
Yeah.
Now, a few tiny tips whilst you're travelling to take a nicer portrait photo. I think one of the easiest things nowadays, which a lot of our viewers we should be able to guarantee, or a lot of our listeners we can guarantee, is actually just using your iPhone, Huawei, is it Samsung,
Google.
have you got Android?
Cameras nowadays on phones, like the megapixels on these cameras are so high.
I think the new Samsung's 108 or something megapixels.
It's ridiculous.
Ridiculous. You can take such good photos on them. Yeah, you won't necessarily be able to blow them up as a poster.
No, but quite often the megapixels are actually higher than some of the cameras that people have.
Yeah, exactly. And just don't think that you have to go and spend thousands of pounds on a DSLR when you've already actually spent a lot of money on your phone. And the camera software on it now is incredible. Such an easy thing. If you're planning on then blowing it up into potential poster at home, then actually do contemplate buy more specific camera gear, which is going to help you capture. I think the iPhone portrait mode that we both use, we've used it for so many of our travel photos just for little snippets. It's can be super crisp and crystal clear, and it actually does that quite nice blur effect on the background.
Yeah, and one of my pet peeves with portraits is actually cutting the feet off. Like, if you have a close-up, that's fine, but what lots of people do is they step back, try and have a photo, and they cut the feet off, and it really, really bugs me. Like that.
I've done it to you on purpose.
We have one of my favourite pictures of us. It has our feet cut off, and it really gets on my nerves. So try and make sure when you're having a full-length photograph to do full length, because there's no such thing as a 90% shot. Like no one wants that. Feet aren't that bad. And another thing that we always say is quite important is, like, if you are on your own, to actually be comfortable and confident and go and ask people to take pictures for you, because you don't want to miss that opportunity just because you're there on your own.
And if you're asking someone to take a photo of you, please do offer to take a photo of them straight away back, because they've taken a few seconds out of their time in these amazing locations to help you, so better off helping them, and then everyone's happy. I think one of the great things, if that isn't an option, if you're in a location, it's just you on your own, you and some mates, you and a partner. Most cameras nowadays, you can either get a tripod for, like this one for the GoPro, which is small, super handy. Morgan can fit his GoPro on the top. Even some of the film cameras, I know this one in particular doesn't. Cheap one from Boots. I know some of them do have like a mini second timer on them. Even this is an old film camera. This is a Yashica TL Electro. This does have a timer on it, and loads of the old school film cameras do. You can even take portraits now. So this is my DJI Mavic Air. You can take portrait photos with this. We've done portrait photos with drones before. You can either wave your hand or you can click a button on your phone. There are so many ways now you can do it. You can do a second timer on your phone and leaning up against a rock if you're out hiking in Dartmoor. There are so many options out there. So don't think that you don't have the tools on you or around you to do it. 99% of the time you can achieve that option just with the smartphone, let alone without having all these other tools.
Yeah, and when asking someone, try and always ask, because there are quite a few people who aren't the best at taking photos, and that honestly doesn't matter. But when you're asking someone else, I always try and pick someone who has a camera on them, because then at least they have a basic understanding, and hopefully you'll then get a really nice picture out of that. Now, another type of photo that you might often take when traveling is landscapes, because you're going to these beautiful places and you want to shoot them. So it's very important to try and, this is another one where try and get there at the right time so there are less people, because what kills lots of landscapes, and I know this happens with lots of sites, is there's loads of people in the way, or you're taking a picture of a beautiful beach and there's loads of people in the way. I know we definitely have a few stories where there's been irritated, I don't know what's a good word to describe them, where there's been people in the way without swearing, people in the way.
We have been subject to others' ignorance,
which has meant that it's made it harder, it's ruined our shot, it's made it harder for us to take photos. So it's very important to actually look beforehand and on arrival of these places for a good vantage point.
When you're looking at the settings of your camera, a lot of the modern cameras, I think even the entry cameras now from the Canon, I think you've got the 250D, which is otherwise known as the SL3, which is sort of Canon's entry-level DSLR. I think for an entry-level DSLR price range, especially if you can get on offer, loads of the places in the UK seasonally will do offers on them. Unbelievably good camera. I was playing around with one a couple of months ago, and even before you take a photo, you can play around with the ISO and everything, and it's going to give you an example shot on your viewfinder screen of what it could potentially look like. Just remember, if you're taking landscape, if it's at night time, you just need to play around with your shutter speed.
Probably have a tripod as well.
Have stabilization. That's a key thing for landscape. The main thing is you will not get amazing in photography unless you practice and you make these mistakes, and you have photos where you get home and you go, this bit's a little bit blurry, or this bit's got too much sun coming in, because that is how you're going to learn to take when you go next time, when you go to another location, these are the things which you're going to think about. You know, you'll be using different filters, UV filters, polarization filters, all these things will start to make a difference. And there are lots of different YouTubes out there who go into unbelievably amazing detail, but simplified in quite layman terms of how to improve your photography.
And this is quite frankly what we're both doing with this podcast. We haven't done this before. We're 7 episodes in at this point, but we're learning. And if there's things you like, tell us about it. And if there's things that we do wrong or that we should improve on, we're always going to try our best to improve on. But tell us as well.
Yeah, you might think my arm swung around too much, or Morgan just too short, but that's sadly just nature. Yeah, Morgan's hair's not how it's going to be. But these things, if you're listening to us on a podcast, you might tell us that the volume's too loud and we need to play around with that just so it becomes a different level. But please give us feedback, because that's how we're going to learn, as this is a new hobby of ours and something we're really passionate about trying to take up, because we have so much experience traveling that we just want to try and pass it over and make sure that we're getting it over to you guys in the best way possible. Now you've decided that you're going to a country, you really want to take a camera with you, you've got a camera of your own for your birthday, or you've had one for a couple of years, or you're borrowing one for a parent or a mate or whatever, or you know you've got the option to take different cameras, like we've got a few options here. How are you going to decide which one to take? I think the key thing is, I think one of the first things we actually do look at is the baggage that we're going to take and the length of the trip.
I normally just try and see how much I can fit in my bag, if I'm honest.
We do normally try and max that out, and we will talk about that in our next camera episode, where we talk about how we pack our bags and how you can really be cheeky about batteries and the weight of batteries, so don't stress too much about those, especially if you're on some of the trips we've been on. We've taken 4, 6, 8 DSLR batteries or drone batteries. They weigh quite a lot now. These are the things which you might be worrying about, but we will talk about and cover in future episodes. But I think one of the key things is you might be stressing about your baggage limit. You might be thinking, do I need DSLR and do I need a GoPro? Actually, I might take my old GoPro because I don't want to risk that one on certain things. But then at the same time, I want to capture and film. I need to take loads of film roll. These are the things which we've gone through ourselves and we've made the mistakes. So I've been on holidays and taken 6 rolls of film and realised I've only shot 2, or I've gone the exact opposite way and wish I've got more.
Yeah, and it's very important with the drone to always look up the specific country's drone rules, because every country is different.
Also look out on the laws and rules of taking photos in public. This is just a bit of disclaimer for us as well, but also guidance for you guys. Is certain countries you won't be allowed to take photos of people in public. You will.
North Korea is definitely one that there's very strict rules on how you can take photos.
And certain countries have extremely strict rules. I believe in Dubai there, or just parts of the Arab Emirates. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in Arab Emirates, if you take photos of women or kids under a certain age, you can genuinely get in trouble. This is stuff I haven't really tested. And Dubai is slightly different because of slightly sort of forced westernized, but every country's got a difference.
And then you've also got to be wary of actually where you're going. So in some areas in Colombia and just general South America where it's a bit more dangerous, you need to be careful about flashing expensive equipment out. So one of the things that I did when traveling around India was I had a Canon 5D Mark II, and what I did was I used black Gorilla sort of duct tape and I taped over every single bit on the camera that said Canon, because it just made the camera look worse.
Yeah.
And people, like everyone knows what Canon is as a brand, and they know it's an expensive brand, and especially in countries like that, people are interested in stealing things like that. Yeah. If you put loads of duct tape off, make it look really rough, put it in a rough bag rather than a new bag, then these are just sort of safety tips that will help you not get your camera stolen.
Yeah, exactly.
So what equipment would you take if you wanted to, if you were going scuba diving? Which options would you go for?
If I was going scuba diving, I'd either, so I've been to a few dive centres where I knew I've only had my DSLR and I don't have a really expensive case for DSLR, but they said, what you can do is you can either rent, or if you just bring a SIM card along, they'll either bring a GoPro with them with a waterproof casing. I believe these new ones can go up to actually quite deep.
Without the casing, it's 10 meters, I think, and that does actually say on the camera. Without the casing, it's about 10 meters, but then you can still get the casing, which is about 45 meters.
Okay, so yeah, I've been with guys, dive masters, who have used GoPros, taken their own, then sent a bunch of files over just because that's part of the experience and they're offering. I've also come across some who have said you can use this camera free will, here's waterproof case, all you need to supply is the SD card.
Yeah.
Or some will just say here's free will and then I'll send the files I later. Some will just offer a rental of a camera in a case. Depends what you're going for. If you're using digital camera, which are actually really useful whilst you're diving, especially if you're not that experienced, you can buy the waterproof cases now much cheaper. One of the main things I would say, especially regarding diving, is if you really aren't that experienced, focus on your diving and learning to dive before you're trying to learn to dive and then mess around with the camera, because there's enough equipment to practice on and learn, and there's so much going on around you and you don't want to miss it, because a fish can swim past you and then you get to the surface and someone goes, oh my god, did you guys see that sailfish, or did you guys see that tuna, or did you see this eel? And you're just like, oh no, I was playing with the digital zoom underwater and staring at a rock.
But we're going to go into this in more detail in another episode. I know we have an episode on this, so
100%.
We'll cut you off there. So for shooting star trails, what I'd do is you'd have a DSLR and you would have to have a tripod. You can't, although we did actually experiment on the boat with Sunday, shooting the stars without having a tripod.
Yeah.
We just put the camera on the floor and had it shooting up.
One of them came out quite cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, back to it. When you guys are choosing your cameras, think about the weight limit that you've got. Think about actually what do you really want to photograph. Are you going for just purely photos? In which case, I wouldn't 100% recommend bringing a drone, because it does weigh a lot. It is a lot of value and it makes you more of a target. Takes up quite a bit of space. If you aren't going with the pure intention of just taking photos, you would be completely perfectly fine just with a phone. You could take a phone and a GoPro. You might take your film camera. One of the recommendations of the film camera is when you pass through an airport, do try and see if, when going through the X-ray, if they will hand over the film of your camera and not put the camera through the X-ray machine, because the X-ray itself can damage the film.
So what sort of camera gear would you take if you were going to, say, Barcelona?
So if we're including all of the things we've got in front of us,
Plus the DSLR.
So for any of our listeners, just so you know, we do have a DJI Mavic Air, we've got a film camera, we've got a GoPro Session, we've got a GoPro
Hero 8.
Hero 8 Black, we've got a cheap disposable film camera, which I believe is from Boots,
And an iPhone.
we've got an iPhone, and we're also going to take into account a DSLR. So personally, I'd probably take iPhone on its own, or I'd take the iPhone and DSLR. It's really depending. If I'm going on this trip and I do have photography in mind, then I'll probably take iPhone and DSLR. If I'm going on this trip and I'm thinking, you know what, I just want to actually focus on the trip, I really want to learn about something there, I'll probably just take my iPhone, to be honest. I personally don't think Barcelona, in my head, I need to take my GoPro. For some people, they want to take the GoPro, use it just
Everywhere.
as effectively the memory bank, because you can stick quite a big memory card in there.
Yeah.
Film getting on the flights, depends how you really want to do it. Take photos of your passport and stuff going on. GoPro's pretty handy. They're pretty inconspicuous. Benefit is you're never going to mess up on the flash as well in public.
Well, I think this camera's quite good if you're going to bars and nights out with your friends, because the flash is quite good on this, and therefore it takes better low light photos than maybe almost all the other cameras apart from maybe the phone.
I think these now cost, £3.50, £5. I think you can get them from Boots. There's a lot of money for something which I believe. I mean, we've still got some film on here. Takes 27 photos, so yeah, it's pretty pricey. benefit of that is you're not going to be spending your evenings going through your phone, going through your camera. You're actually just taking that photo in the moment, capturing that really specific fun moment. That's the reason why you've got it out. That's why I do actually really appreciate these cameras.
And you're really not bothered about them being stolen either.
No.
Because they're literally called a throwaway camera.
Yeah, exactly. All they're doing is popping out the film and processing that later on.
Yeah.
I think what we really need to get into talking about now is when are cameras a good idea to bring on your holiday, and in certain moments good idea to actually use them.
So for me, it's really important, and like as I said before, I forget things and actually remembering memories.
Yeah.
And I find that images and videos can actually help invoke emotion. And so an example of this is when we're in Iguazu and we were on the motorboats. Like just the amount of laughter I have no idea what it was, but we were laughing so much that day. And I remember that feeling, but by watching that video, I feel it again.
Yeah.
And it was a similar thing with the luge in New Zealand. We had so much fun that day, and we would barely remember. I barely remember like crashing into the back of you, nearly knocking you off the track, and then crashing head on into the tyres. We have that on camera.
Yeah.
And that is such a fun memory and a brilliant thing we did together.
And I think one of the main things is, in terms of that footage being taken, is we recorded it using the GoPro in a sense that it didn't at all obstruct from our experience of that moment.
Yeah, which is what I personally always try and do.
Which is, I think, quite a key thing for a lot of people out there, whether you're listening or watching this. I think my biggest thing when it comes to cameras, and this sort of intertwines into our next point, but I think it makes it quite good, is for me is you've spent this time saving up your money, you've spent this time traveling to a location. Your number one thing before you ever touch a camera needs to be living in that moment and enjoying where you are in that moment. Chances are you're never going to be there again. You're not going to be with the same people. You're not going to be the same age. You're not going to ever be there at that place in that exact same point in time. If you don't enjoy that moment, then you've wasted that moment. Once you've enjoyed that moment, if you believe that getting a quick iPhone photo or GoPro or whatever photo of you in that moment, then it's key, fine, but don't spend your whole time, and I've seen it time and time again, people taking photos thinking like, oh my god, you know, my 200 followers on Instagram really want to see this photo, and I'm going to spend Yeah, they might want to see it, but there's no point let's say you've got 3 hours at Machu Picchu. I know of people who would stand there for a good 2 hours just trying to take a photo and not actually enjoy being in that place, and that for me is a key thing. When I've been on, especially around wildlife, which for any of you guys don't know, wildlife photography is my biggest passion in the photography world. There are so many times I know I've seen something and I do not have time to get the camera out, or actually I just want to completely live in that singular moment of seeing it, because I know for a fact I'll never capture that emotion. I will waste that time trying to get my camera out.
So that's a slightly different one, because the one in the examples I spoke about were actually of us, and you can see our emotions.
Yeah.
Whereas that's obviously taking a
Something
picture
else.
of something else. Yeah.
It's trying to yeah, I think that's the difference. Is the ones which you speak about of us, that's from like someone's perspective watching us. That's a perspective we won't ever get. But I think the times when I know I purposely haven't taken my camera out is when I'm almost trying to recreate my own, what I'm seeing through my eyes, and trying to capture that emotion of, you know, when I've seen a bear really up close. I purposely haven't taken the camera out, one, because it's stupid to take a camera out and lose my focus on a mother bear, but also in that exact moment I know I can talk about it a million times, but I can never replicate that moment to anyone. But that's also a moment I know will never leave me.
Yeah, which I think, is, which you almost said but didn't quite say, is that if in some of those experiences, if you're not going to get a good photo, don't waste your time trying, when you're just going to miss the experience.
Yeah.
Because there are some times where I do genuinely, and when I travel, have my GoPro on me 90 99% of the time. But I know that anything at night, it's just not worth taking.
You know what? I think this is actually in film with. Oh, I'm going to get it corrected. I think it's Steve Carell, and I think it's Life of Walter Mitty. Right at the end of the film, he goes and sees this photographer, and the photographer's been out there for like 8 or 9 months trying to capture a photo of a snow leopard. Hadn't succeeded, and the snow leopard comes out, and instead of ever taking the photo, he just moves the camera to one side and just watches it. Because there's so many events like that. When you're in the pub with your mates, quickly grab a phone, take a photo of you guys together, but just remember that is a chance that, you know, that group of friends, for example, might be the only time you guys are together again. Really enjoy that moment. Don't just focus on the content, but at the same time do enjoy taking the photos. If you're going out on a holiday and one of your dream goals to practice is editing or trying to grow your Instagram because you want it to become your job or lifestyle, then go for it. But
well, that's where
just sort of take a pinch of salt of everything we're saying, because this is also strongly our opinion and how we've sort of lived around photography.
Well, and that's a very important point, which is a best kept secret, which is just go and do it. Go and take these photos and post them online. They're not going to be perfect. They might be. I mean, sometimes they are, but
they're not going to be perfect.
But just go and take them and post them, and because you're always going to get better, and the only way you'll get better is by actually going out, taking these photos and practicing, and don't delete them if they're bad.
If you're drunk in a bar, let's say in Barcelona, and you're with your mates and one of you's taken out a camera and someone's done something funny, or you know, you're in a hostel and you're playing a game and someone's captured a moment,
fallen off the bar
or or you're in fancy dress, keep those photos, because to be honest, they're the ones you're actually going to really care about. It's not when you've done this perfect Instagram photo where you think you're amazing. It's the ones where you're with your mates, the ones you really care about.
The real ones.
Yeah, your real photos, the ones which some people sadly aren't willing to post on Instagram because they're...
Or you post on your Finsta instead.
Just to finish off this episode, we're going to tell one of our funny stories, and we're also going to quickly mention the equipment that we took on the holiday. Morgan and I went to Australia and New Zealand for a total of, I think it was around 2 months.
It was about 7 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, so 2 weeks. 7 weeks. 7 weeks, 2 months. No, not 7 weeks and 2 months. We started off in New Zealand for the first just around 2 weeks, then we spent the rest of the time in Australia. We took 1 drone, 2 GoPros, 2 DSLRs,
2 phones,
3 phones. But we were camp fanning around, so we weren't so stressed about some of the transport and the weight issues, because we camp fanned complete North-South Island, and then we went from Cairns all the way down to Sydney. Our moment which we're going to talk about with photography is when we were coming back up from Queenstown.
It's really bothering me. I can't actually remember the name of the lake, because it's really
And then
famous.
we were driving past a picturesque, almost looked like our real life had been saturated. It was that blue. We went to Lake Tekapo, where there's an amazing church. Very stereotypical. A lot of guys on Instagram do it, but it was the first time Morgan and I really decided we're going to attempt.
So this was
nighttime photography.
Yeah, this was one that we actually found online, and then specifically went to this place on our way back to the airport.
Yeah.
Or there or thereabouts. And we found it online and then went there in the evening.
A lot of people normally go there. We were in the off season, stereotypically winter for New Zealand, so it was super cold. It was probably -3 to -5 degrees. Morgan and I had dinner basically staked out in this car park right next to the church. I think we were the only ones there the whole time. We were just using our DSLRs, for anyone
And tripods.
wondering. And both had our mini tripods. And I think it got to maybe between 10:30 and 11 p.m, and we decided we'd start taking photos and just practice throughout the night and just keep reviewing the photos.
So with Star Trials, it's quite hard to get that perfect photo first time. So you need to, because the way the light refracts and just any little change, because you're opening the shutter speed for about 30 seconds. So any change in light or movement can change the whole photo drastically. So we genuinely spent about 3 hours taking photos this night.
And then really sadly, Morgan and I had been waiting until it got dark enough, and you're in this, I think it's called the Mackenzie Zone. It was one of the first dark sky reserves in the world, and it feels like there's zero light pollution at all. Stunning sky, and
very cold.
Really irritating. Morgan and I started taking photos. We're just learning how to take them properly of the night sky for the first time, and this group of maybe 20 people all together turned up and were just unbelievably ignorant, and decided whilst we were trying to take these 30-second shutter speeds, and some of you guys listening or watching might have experienced it before, whether someone's walking across you and just purposely doing it just for the sake of it, they were all using flashes on their cameras, which firstly is probably going to take an awful photo. They're driving around in the car just trying to park it up for ages so we can take a photo for a long time. But every time, and they're using head torches as well.
Head torches was the most annoying. You can have a flash and you can just take a picture of the church because it's a famous church, but walking around with the head torches whilst we're blatantly trying to take photos,
irritating. Ooh, sir. Main sort of follow-up on this story is please don't be ignorant to people taking photos. The back end of this story was me getting a tiny bit of revenge. They were ignorant for maybe 2.5 hours. Revenge was having been bullied by head torches of this group of 20 people. Right at the end, I was getting in the camper van. I then waited for Morgan to pack his camera up. He was taking the last couple of shots, and then Morgan purposely, as slowly as he could, packed up his camera, turned on his head torch, slowly walked across the people, and I just sat there in the camper with full beams on, with this group of 20 people just staring at me for about 10 minutes straight, just because we were so annoyed. I think it got to maybe got to 2 a.m. or something.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest,
I was just infuriated.
Like, you might have even made their photos better because they were taking pictures with flash, which means they only would have been taking pictures of a church. So you could have actually been giving them the perfect lighting. So maybe
let's hope I didn't.
Maybe they were turning around going, "Thanks, mate."
Anyway, that's just a bit of a funny story of Morgan and I's experience, and we hope you guys have learned something new and started to get you guys thinking about when you go on holiday, or whether it's domestic or overseas, just about the kind of camera equipment that you can think of. Remember, you don't really need to spend too much money on your camera equipment. You can get amazing second-hand cameras. Morgan's got a lot of his cameras second-hand recently, and as long as you do your research, you sort of take some of it with a pinch of salt, you can get amazing quality kit second-hand still.
And if you have any stories like ours to do with photography, or have any questions, if you have stories, message us on the BKS Instagram and title the message or have the first line of the message all caps story time. And if you have any tips for us or want us to give you some tips, then title it tips and then send your message, and we'll try and reply to as many as we can and possibly do a response video in the future.
A lot of you guys listening will hopefully be on podcasts. You might be watching on YouTube. Just one of the biggest things we can ask to help us, and so that we can hopefully provide you guys more content, is if you're listening on a podcast, please leave us a review. Please try and share us with a friend if you feel you've learned something, or if one of your friends is massively into travel and you think they can learn something. If you're on YouTube, also very easy to share it with a friend. There is even that little share button. You can copy the URL or share it directly on certain platforms. If you leave a comment below, it can also help us drastically. If you leave a like, notification, or if you're super generous, and we hope you are, please click that subscribe button.
It's free. I'm Morgan.
And I'm Will.
And this is Best
Kept Secrets Travel.
Roll the outro.
Yeah, let's make it happen. I hope that you can handle going on adventures, best kept secret travels. Yeah, all over the globe, having fun, you know the deal. Amazing secret locations, hang out with Morgan and Will. Educate and entertain, haggle in the market, sharing their experiences. Time to get it started. Let's go.